So right now, as I currently do this video, Sergey Lavrov and, of course, Marco Rubio are meeting in Saudi Arabia, uh, basically to talk past each other. I think these talks, and like I say, we'll probably end up covering it after this video, but I think these talks are going to be trumpeted as some sort of success, where in reality, nothing really was happened. No, there was no serious breakthrough on this. And I very, very much think that is the case of what's going to happen. Because remember, Marco Rubio has already stated why he's going there. He is going there to see if Russia is actually serious about their requests for peace. And we know Russia is not serious about its quest for peace on this front. Vladimir Putin has restated time and time again what his diplomatic outcomes are that he wants to get. And that is the complete supplication of Ukraine to Russian rule, pretty much. He has restated that time and time and time again. And yet, Sergey Lavrov, of course, is going there today because his stated objective of what he believes is happening is that this is going to start the renormalization of diplomatic relations between Russia and America. And those two things are completely different diplomatic objectives. Completely diplomatic objectives. So what's going to happen is they are going to end up talking past each other, and both sides will, I can guarantee, come out saying, oh, we've achieved, I don't know, who knows what. But I don't think anything will get achieved. Whether anything will be announced, who knows? We don't know. Maybe we'll find out what gets talked about in this conversation. I don't know. We'll probably find out very soon. But who knows? I don't think this talk will really achieve anything. I think both parties are going to talk past each other. But in the meanwhile, of course, we've now had this plan being released by Trump. And this is a confidential plan that is leaked by the Ukrainians, basically to put Ukraine in a stranglehold economically. And bear in mind, this is the type of thing they are fighting against Russia from doing to them. Why on earth are they going to agree to it, even if it gives them security guarantees? So probably a lot of yet more action this week in and around what can happen on this. But this is yet again another piece of the puzzle and what's going to happen here. But Trump here is demanding, from what you'll see in a moment, Trump is demanding more money from Ukraine than what was demanded by the Treaty of Versailles from Germany. And gee, how well did that go for Germany? So before we do get into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off edition called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack into this because this is unbelievable. Unbelievable. So this was coming from the Telegraph that revealed this. And it's Trump's confidential plan to put Ukraine in a stranglehold. So Donald Trump's demand for $500 billion worth of payback from Ukraine goes far beyond US control now over the country's critical materials. It covers everything from ports and infrastructure to oil and gas, and the largest resource base of the country. The terms contracted that landed at Vladimir Zelensky's office just last week amount to the US economic colonization of Ukraine in legal perpetuity. So once this gets handed over, this can't be undone. It is being handed over permanently to this. This is just unacceptable. I cannot believe they are asking for this and making this ask. It is unbelievable to see the amount being demanded from them. And in legal perpetuity, so there's no getting out of this. It implies a burden of reparations that cannot possibly be achieved. The document has now caused concern and panic in Kyiv. The Telegraph obtained a draft now of this pre-decisional contract marked private and confidential, dated February the 7th, 2025. It states that the US and Ukraine should form a joint investment fund to ensure that hostile parties to the conflict do not benefit from the reconstruction of Ukraine. The agreement covers the economic value associated with resources of Ukraine, including mineral resources, oil, gas resources, ports, and other infrastructure. It is leveraging. The leveraging now is, of course, unclear what else, of course, might be encompassed in this, saying this agreement shall be governed by New York law without regard to conflict of law principles, it states. So this isn't even going to be governed by US law. It is specifically going to be covered by New York law. Now, that is what wild. Why is New York law being encompassed here? I think, and this might be a conspiracy theory, but I really do seriously think you might see Donald Trump's name suddenly start popping up in all those places in Ukraine to take advantage of all that contract, all that stuff miraculously going to be guaranteed to Trump's, his own family, his own local allies. Why isn't New York law being specifically stated in this? That is and should be ringing a lot of alarm bells, not only over here, but in America as well. That is highly suspicious. So it continues. The US will take 50% of recurring revenues received by Ukraine from all extraction of resources, and 50% of the financial value of all new licenses issued to third parties for the future monetization of resources. There will be a lien on such revenues in favor of the US that the clause means that they pay us first, then feed your children, said one source close to negotiations. Yeah, this is unbelievable that this is being asked for in this such a way. I have said before, this seems to be coming once again from the idea that Donald Trump asks for like the extreme ask when in reality he wants here. So you negotiate him down from like the extreme ask to here. This seems to be once again that tactic in play. And then we've always said the danger comes where someone just turns around and just goes, no. Why am I even going to negotiate when you're asking for something so extreme? It does seem like that's the case that Ukraine is going to go with that. And I think we as Europe should be backing them up on this. Europe needs to go completely ride or die for Ukraine. We need to go all in because it is becoming very, very clear that unless Donald Trump gets what he wants from Ukraine, he's going to let Russia do what he wants, even including, as we are now hearing from Kremlin sources, strike NATO countries. And you don't have to worry about us or Article 5 because we ain't gonna come to their rescue, which is highly troubling from all this. We are entering an incredibly dangerous period, the likes of which I don't think we have seen really leading up to 2 previous world wars. Unfortunately, that is how serious I think the situation really needs to be addressed for this. So it states that, quote, for all future licenses, the US will have the right of first refusal for the purchases of the export materials. Washington will have sovereign immunity, sovereign immunity, and acquire nearly total control over most of now Ukraine's commodity and resource economy. The fund shall have the exclusive right to establish the method, selection criteria, the terms and conditions. All future license projects and so forth in this vein seem to have been written by private lawyers not by the US Department of State or even Commerce, which again makes me highly suspicious that this is Trump. And who knows, maybe this is how Trump gets impeached. It seems to me this is being specifically written so that Trump and his allies, or maybe even Trump and his family, can basically take full control of all these resources and profit from this. And at that point, he is using the office of the presidency to financially enrich himself. This is insane. This is being offered. I mean, I don't know if that will come out or be proven true, but it seems like this is why it is. If this is, explicitly mentions New York state law, it explicitly mentions that they've said here this has been written by private lawyers, not actual the US Department of State or Commerce, which is again highly, highly suspicious. So President Zelensky himself proposed the idea of giving the US a direct stake in Ukraine's rare earth materials and critical materials on a visit to Trump Tower back in September, hoping to smooth the way for continued arms deliveries. He calculated that it would lead to the US and economic companies now to setting up operations on the ground, creating now a political tripwire that would deter Putin from attacking again. Again, it's not a bad idea, Zelensky doing that, because it creates exactly what he wants, this political tripwire to make Putin from attacking again, or make him think twice about doing that. However, when you have Trump doing this, seemingly to demand what we've just seen and heard, this isn't a tripwire. This is taking over, resources of Ukraine, lock, stock, and barrel. So some of these mineral bases are, of course, near the front line in eastern Ukraine or even in Russian-occupied areas. And he has played them up the dangers now of letting these strategic reserves of titanium, tungsten, uranium, and graphite and rare earths fall into Russia's hands. We are talking about a deal. Let's do a deal. We are only for it, he said. And again, he's right here. You can see the map of where those resources are in there. And it is something we should be very, very well aware of, why Putin wants control of these territories, for the exact control of those resources. Because then he could use those resources to, rebuild his army. And then where's it going to go next? Well, there sure is a lot of, more materials in Ukraine he would kind of like to get a hold of. So, yeah. Anyway, but it continues. He probably did not expect now to be confronted with terms normally imposed on aggressor states defeated in war. They are worse than the financial penalties imposed on Germany and Japan after their defeat in 1945. Both countries were ultimately net recipients of funds now from victorious allies. If this draft were accepted, Trump's demand would amount now to a higher share of Ukrainian GDP than the reparations imposed on Germany in the Versailles Treaty that were later whittled down at the London Conference in 1921. But by the Dawes Plan in 1924, at that very same time, he seems now willing to let Russia off the hook entirely. Donald Trump told Fox News that Ukraine had, quote, essentially agreed to hand over $500 billion. They have tremendous value in land in terms of rare earths, in terms of oil and gas, in terms of other things, he said. He warned that Ukraine should be handed to Putin on a plate if they reject these terms. They may make a deal, they may not make a deal. They may be Russian someday, or they may not be Russian someday. But I want this money back, he said. I am seriously coming to have to accept the conclusion we as Europe are going to have to accept we might have to military intervene. Like I am dead serious about that. I am coming to the conclusion we as Europe are going to have to come to that. Because If Ukraine does not accept this, there's no reason for them to accept this. This is absolutely insane for them to accept this. Then what? Does Trump pull out? Does he pull out more troops from Europe as well? We as Europeans are looking at very, very few options now, vanishing the left so on the table. Yes, we can continue to support Ukraine. But if if America decides to normalize relations again with Russia, undoing sanctions, blocking them from the SWIFT system, for example, all of a sudden, that's Putin with a lot more money now to spend on that war. And we are seriously looking at an option where we as Europe will maybe have to consider military intervention to stop this. Like, we cannot take that option off the table. We cannot take that option off the table because otherwise, once again, Putin can make very similar threats to other European countries, namely the Baltic states, maybe even Poland. And then what? Oh, he's threatened military action against us. Do we back down like we did in Ukraine or not? Like, we are very rapidly, I feel, approaching that point where we have to now consider that reality. We have to consider that reality that Europe may be going to war. And I do not say that lightly. I really do think we are in a situation where we could be very well be seeing Europe go to war against Russia. And it is because of Donald Trump's absolute ludicrous foreign policy decisions. And it is all on Donald Trump that this is happening. Anyway, back to this. Trump had obviously said that the US has spent over $300 billion so far on the war, adding that it would be stupid to hand over any more. In fact, 5 packages agreed by Congress totaled $175 billion, of which $70 billion was actually spent on US weapons production. Some of it in the form of humanitarian grants, but much of it was Lend-Lease money that must be repaid. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham suggested at the Munich conference over the weekend that Trump's demand was a clever ploy to boost now the declining popular support for the Ukrainian cause, saying that he can go to the American people and say, Ukraine is not a burden, it is a benefit, he said. Pretty bold way to do that. Why do you have to make such a ridiculous claim to do that then? Like, why? Because you can already say that right now. You don't have to make such crazy demands. Anyway, Graham went on to tell the Europeans to root hard now for the idea because it locks Washington into defending a future settlement, saying, if we sign this materials agreement, Putin is screwed because Trump will defend the deal, he said. Ukrainian officials had to tiptoe through this complete minefield at the Munich Forum, trying to smile very gamely and talking up hopes of a resource deal, while all the same time pleading that the current text breaches Ukrainian law and needs redrafting. Well, indeed. So, talk now of Ukraine's resource wealth has now become surreal. A figure of $26 trillion is being cast around for combined material reserves on hydrocarbon reserves, and the sums are now complete make-believe. Ukraine probably has the largest lithium basin in Europe, but lithium prices have now crashed 88% since the bubble burst back in 2022. Large reserves are, of course, now being discovered all over the world. McDent-Caldon, Nevada, is thought now to be the biggest lithium deposit on the planet, with 40 million metric tons alone, enough now to catapult the US ahead of China. The Thacker Pass project, which will be operational next year, they're saying the value of lithium is in the processing and the downstreaming of the industries. Unlocked rock processing still sitting in Ukraine, but it is now useless to the US. This is a very similar story for all rare earth materials. They are not rare, Mining companies in the US abandoned the business back in the 1990s because the profit margins were far too low. The US government was asleep at the wheel and let this happen, waking up now to discover that China had acquired a strategic stranglehold over the supplies of critical elements now needed for high-tech and advanced weapons. That problem is now being resolved. Ukraine has the cobalt for most EV batteries, now use, of course, lithium. Forest phosphate is no longer needed for cobalt. Furthermore, sodium ion and sulfur batteries will be limited in the future for this growth demand for lithium. So will recycling. One could go on, but the mineral scarcity story is now wildly exaggerated. As for the shale gas, some of the Kyiv field does lie currently under Putin control, but the Western Carpathian reserves are some complex geology, and with high drilling costs, has now caused Chevron to pull out, just as it did in Poland. Ukraine has now more potential as an exporter of electricity to Europe than renewables, and of course nuclear expansion. But this is not what Donald is now on Donald Trump's mind. So like I say, when you're reading this, it's just surreal. It's just absolutely surreal. Generally, is surreal going through this. So Ukraine can, of course, cannot possibly meet, of course, his 500 billion demand in any meaningful time frame. Leaving aside, of course, this now larger matter of whether it is honourable to treat a victim nation in this fashion after it has held the line of battle for the liberal democracies at enormous sacrifice now for 3 years. Who really has a debt to whom, one might ask? I would agree. I would agree. We are at a point. This is why I am very, very glad Starmer's come out and said, yeah, British troops in Ukraine. Like we owe that to Ukraine. And I'm very glad he has said that. And I am glad that there's talk even this morning about having now to raise the defense budget. Because we are going to have to do that. We are left now with very little option to do that. You have to deal with world events as they come. And I don't see how this this gets out of it. But I tell you now, Europe now has to really be united more so, I think, than ever before. More so than ever before, especially in sort of the coming days and weeks, depending what Russia and America agree. So, my style of deal making is, of course, quite simple and straightforward. Trump said in his book, The Art of the Deal. I am very high, and then I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing to get whatever I'm after. In genuine commerce, the other side can usually, of course, walk away. Trump's demand is an iron fist of coercion by near imperialism power against a weaker nation, well, now with its back to the wall, and of course, for all the commodity bonanza that exists chiefly now in Trump's head. Oftentimes, the best deal you make is the deals you don't make, Trump said, offering yet another one of his pearls. Zelensky does not have that luxury. He has to pick between the military violation of Ukraine by Putin and the economic violation of Ukraine by his own ally. We as Europe are going to have to really stand up to this. Massively so. Massively so. Like, we cannot afford to be weak. We have to be very much united. Every country in Europe is now going to have to re-examine what they're spending on defense on this one. I know that upsets a lot of people sometimes, but we're going to have to, in light of all this, because you are now looking at the greatest what if in a lot of time. Putin inside is already saying that, Trump has given him the green light to strike, London, Berlin, Paris. We are, yeah, we're going to take defense and defense spending and security very seriously indeed. Because I'll tell you what, we are in a completely uncharted waters, potentially, in the next couple of days. are going to determine really the future of a lot of stuff that's going to happen. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.